My grandfather was a Baptist minister, and my father was a Baptist minister. And that's why I was in Philadelphia, New York. My mother was there at the time. We moved in into western New York. We then moved into northern Pennsylvania, a little town called Susquehanna. And from Susquehanna down into the anthracite region of northern Pennsylvania, in the area between Carbondale and Scranton, and I graduated from Blakely High School there in the valley. So our upbringing was very strict from the standpoint of what we could do and what we couldn't do. And part of what they taught us was that most rewards are delayed. Getting the concept of instant gratification is not being a good thing for anybody, but kind of aiming for the future and planning for the future. So that was a big part of our upbringing, that concept of service, the concept of do your thing and everything will turn out all right in the end. Was allowed to go to medical school through the kindness of Dr. William Parkinson, who was dean at that time. It was April of 1937. I had applied to the University of Pittsburgh and I had applied to Temple. A friend of mine wrote the dean and told him that I would be a good student. I didn't know about this. I went to see the dean, had an interview with him. He said, "Do you have any money?" I said, "I've got $40. He said, "You've also got a lot of nerve." He accepted me, gave me a place to live, gave me a job. The job was night switchboard on the hospital PX system. And my freshman year, I worked every other night. But I progressed then to working on the information desk, and the hours were better, and I got to sleep and I got to study. I was really saved in that process by my roommate, who took notes and reviewed them with me. At that time, I had an appointment in internal medicine. And I got a notice through the mail that they had all the internists they needed. They needed others, but I talked to the dean about it, and he said, "Well, I can keep you here if you would like to go into anesthesiology or psychiatry." Without much thought, I said, "I think I'll go into the Navy." So I did. I served first at Portsmouth Naval Hospital. I was there when the war ended, and then was transferred to an induction center at Camp Perry, where we examined and processed 500 new recruits every day. My final duty was in Camp Allen, Norfolk, which was a Navy prison. A little known fact during the war was that there were many soldiers and sailors who were criminals. And I asked about the total number, and they said, "Well, you know, when you get down to the bottom of the barrel, you're recruiting criminals. They come in as criminals and they remain criminals." That was interesting. And then I finished. I got out and went back to Temple to see what was open. I did not want to go into internal medicine because the individual who was in charge of medicine at that time had gone on to Seton Hall to start a medical school. And the new chief of medicine was a Navy captain, and I'd had, I think, enough of the Navy at that time. There was suddenly an opening in surgery. So almost without thinking about it, I said, okay, I think I'll be a surgeon. So I did, and I finished there. And I finished the course there in 1949. I asked one of my fellow surgeons what he did, and he said, I take care of the skin and its contents. That's a quote that I've never forgotten. But I'd like to point out to you that in 1950, Delaware was not well populated with specialty surgeons. We had perhaps 2 orthopedic surgeons. We had no neurosurgeon. We had no plastic surgeon. We had no pediatric surgeon. The gynecologist and the urologist did surgery. But what it really came down to is we did everything that needed to be done except for neurosurgery. At that time, we were transferring to Philadelphia and sometimes to Baltimore. So Dr. Richards and I did a great deal of the pediatric surgery for years, because at that time the AI DuPont was not doing anything but orthopedics. And it was a long trip to Philadelphia. So we took care of newborns, we took care of little kids. We did a lot of fracture work, not open fracture, but closed fracture that did not require surgery. We did a little bit of plastic surgery, we did a little bit of anything you can mention. Now, before the merger, the Delaware Academy of Medicine was a neutral ground, an honest broker, if you will. There was a committee working on trying to decide whether merger of the 3 hospitals was feasible and how it could be done. And they had consultants and they had others. One of the things that kicked this off really was a report done back in the 50s by the Carnegie Foundation, who was looking for places to put new medical schools. And they decided that Delaware would be a great place for a medical school. So there was really a survey done to find out whether that was feasible. And it could have been done for $50 million and $5 million a year at that time. So they decided they didn't really want to do that. But a part of the focus of the merger was how can we improve the educational programs. So through the Academy of Medicine as a neutral, they actually hired a man by the name of Frank Fetter and put him in charge of medical education development. He spent 3 years with us, I guess, without a great deal of success because things didn't gel. And he went down to University of South Carolina as the dean there. But it was the academy that made that activity possible and made the free exchange of ideas good without the politics usually involved. People wonder why the Delaware Academy of Medicine has survived to this point. When I first came to town, it was the meeting ground, neutral meeting ground. And at that time, the hospitals had a monthly staff meeting. They held them there. And it was a beautiful building. I don't know whether you've been in it, but at that time it was just the front of the building. The back hadn't been added. But it was a magnificent auditorium. The only disadvantage was that the entrance was alongside of the podium or the lecterns, so if you came in late, you had to scramble by all these things. But the great thing about it was that members of all the staff came together to meet. And one of the greatest things about the academy at that time was the basement, which was set up with stone walls and kind of rustic. And after the meetings, we'd go down there and eat good food. I know that the Medical Society has got a young physicians organization. It's quite successful. They give them a seat on the board and that sort of thing. I think we could. No, I don't. I think their time is limited. I really do. And I've discovered that this generation is not as gung ho about working as we were in the 40s. You know, we hate, when I was a surgical resident, I hated to go home because I was afraid I was going to miss a good case, whether I could do it or whether I could see it. And there's only a certain amount of time to get this opportunity. I don't see that kind of vigor, and I don't see that vigor in the programs that women and men are choosing. I think one of the things we haven't really taken into consideration is the impact on medical care and medical education brought about by the fact that half the students in medical school are now women. Very bright, very energetic women who have an idea, a new idea, that there's more to life than medicine, radical though it may seem. I think that's going to change the complexion of everything that we do. And if you'll notice now, I think the last two presidents of the Medical Society have been female. I think that's great because they bring a balance of not accommodation, but of having a life and having a family and still practicing on their terms. Proud of the past, pleased with the present, and confident of the future. That's the final word.